In the last video, we met the most basic method of sketching a graph, namely by making a big list of solutions. And that process was, frankly, kind of tedious, right? Making a big list of solutions took a long time. Fortunately, we know someone who's really good at doing tedious things, namely the calculator. We can use the calculator to get a basic idea of the shape of the graph, but the calculator has some limitations that we have to be careful of. First, in order to put an equation into the calculator, we have to be able to solve the equation for y. Right, so that's not that big a deal. So let's consider as our example the equation 2x minus 4y equals 8. To solve this for y, first we'll subtract 2x on both sides. We'll get negative 4y equals 8 minus 2x. Then we'll multiply both sides by negative a fourth. So those will cancel and we're left with just y. Here we must remember to distribute. 8 times negative a fourth is negative 2. Negative a fourth times negative 2 is positive a half. We'll have y equals negative 2 plus a half x. To enter our equation, we just hit y equal, and we punch in the right-hand side of our equation that we just solved for y. So negative 2 plus 1/2 x. Okay, now to get the basic graph, we can just hit the graph key. Right? Now by default, we have it looks like a whole bunch of x's and a whole bunch of y's. To see what values of x and y we're looking at, we can press the window button. You see, we see x minimum, x maximum, and x scale. X scale tells it how many tick marks to give us. Y minimum, y maximum, and y scale, again, how many tick marks to give us. This x res, in general, don't monkey with. So x min and x max are going to be important to us. Y min and y max are going to be important to us. Notice what happens. So here's this graph. If I change y min to be negative 5 and y max to be 5, right, now my graph is stretched out horizontally. Now, okay, remember that when we made the graph in the last video, we ended up with kind of a tall, skinny graph. Of course, we can't do that really on the calculator, because the calculator's screen just stays the same size no matter what we're trying to graph. But there are two different things that we can do to try to capture what we did with that tall, skinny graph. The first thing that we might want to do is pick a range of x values and see all of the y values that go with those. In order to do that, first we enter our x values in window. Say we're interested in x values between, say, negative 2 and 25. Right. Now, to get all of the y values that go with that, we'll click the zoom button, and this gives us a whole menu of different ways of zooming on our graph. we want to choose Zoom Fit, which is option 0. So we can scroll down to Zoom Fit or hit the 0 key. And now when we hit enter, we get our graph showing our x's and all of the y values that go with them. So that gets the effect of our tall, skinny graph of showing all of the appropriate y values. But when we do that, inevitably, our graph ends up kind of squished, right? One of the things we're going to want to look at is how steep our line is, and we can't get that impression when our axes are drawn at different scales. Notice how the tick marks here on the x-axis are much closer together than they are on the y-axis. How could we get our graph set to a place where the tick marks are the same distance apart? We might think of saying, -10 up to 10 for x, and then -10 up to 10 for y. That seems like it ought to do it. But notice how the calculator screen is wider than it is tall. If we have the same range of values for x that we have for y, we end up with our x tick marks further apart. How can we fix it? Well, we could look in the manual and see exactly what's called the aspect ratio is. Or we could use another one of the zoom functions. When we do this, we're going to start by choosing our range of y values. So we'll go into Window, and I just want to look at y going from -5 up to 5. If you don't care about the y values involved, you can skip this step. Now I'm going to click Zoom, and I'm going to choose Zoom Square. That's option 5 down here. And we see the tick marks on the y-axis and the tick marks on the x-axis are now the same distance apart. Right, that Zoom Square feature says, keep my y values and give me the x values that give the tick marks the same distance apart. So Zoom Square is what you want when, for example, you want to decide how steep your line is. So we can't get a tall, skinny graph on the calculator, but we can get all the y values that go with our x's by using Zoom Fit, and we can get a good idea of the shape of the graph by using Zoom Square. We just can't do both of those at once.